Hello, everyone, and welcome to ProcureCon Contingent Staffing 2021. I'm thrilled to introduce our next set of panelists who will be leading our keynote panel, Disruption and Overdrive, Trends and Techniques to Elevate Your Contingent Staffing Program in 2021. I want to welcome the panelists and Jimmy Iannuzzi of NTED Workforce, who will be our moderator for today's session. Welcome, Jimmy and everyone else, and go ahead and kick things off.
Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome to Disruption and Overdrive. We have a wonderful panel here today to cover three important topics in the contingent labor market. To introduce our panel, we have Alan Chilton of BASF, Deb Briffa of KellyOCG, Serene Vividelli of Common Spirit Health. My name again is Jimmy Iannuzzi of NTED Workforce. We are an ISO 20001-2018 certified staffing partner. As we get going, we are going to focus on, again, three topics here today: trends and techniques, talent supply and demand, direct sourcing, and total talent management. Each panelist is going to have an opportunity to share a bit from their perspective, which again is varied, which is great for the team here, and have a nice dialogue of back and forth. So as mentioned, we're going to go ahead right into trends and techniques. Each panelist is going to have a little bit of time to introduce themselves and their organization and talk a little bit about what they're seeing in the market today, obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic and other factors affecting the labor market. We're going to go ahead and start with Alan, and the time is yours.
All right, thanks, Jimmy. So I currently lead vendor programs that deliver both RPO and MSP services for BASF in North America, and I've held similar responsibilities in the pharmaceutical, financial, and technology research industries during my career. BASF is one of the world's largest chemical companies, and our chemicals are in a lot of the things we all buy at the store. Our old tagline that you may remember was, "We don't make the products you buy, we make the products you buy better." Now, as you see in the bottom, it's "We create chemistry." I like the old one a little bit better. It told you more about us. So being one of the world's largest chemical manufacturers, our manufacturing and R&D sites have continued to operate throughout the pandemic, and many of our workers, both full-time and contingent, are considered essential workers. And this is true for many manufacturing companies. And some of the trends I'm currently seeing, for one, there appears to be fewer job seekers on the market, which is leading to less candidate submittals for contingent roles and less applicants for our full-time roles. There's competition for the available workers, which is leading to more no-shows for interviews and more declined offers. And despite the high competition for available workers, we're not seeing higher levels of turnover right now in our existing workforce. But all of these factors have required us to quote unquote customize our program delivery for sites that are experiencing high levels of disruption. So we haven't necessarily changed our entire program, but we've approached it with action plans for those sites that need to do things a bit differently.
Absolutely, thanks, Alan. And I think that's great. I think you hit the nail on the head. With the workforce so mobile now and able to work wherever, it's creating this mass competition for candidates across the country, not just within your individual market. Candidates have a lot of choice right now based on this remote everywhere concept. So Deb, why don't you take a moment, introduce yourself, and what you're seeing from the perspective of an MSP who's working with your clients.
Sure, thank you, Jimmy. And I'm Deb Briffa of KellyOCG, part of Kelly Services, really the organization that founded the contingent industry over 75 years ago. I run some of our key strategic programs called Vantage Accounts. And really what we're seeing from our perspective, certainly from a talent perspective, being in the talent industry, is three buckets of individuals, right? Work anywhere, work for all, and work at will. And really working anywhere, obviously, is the fact that everyone is working remotely, or a large majority of people, which creates a situation of work for all. The geographic boundaries that used to be in place that would preclude people from maybe joining an organization or working in an industry that they were not co-located near are really gone now. So it's offering a lot more opportunities to individuals across the country and across the globe. And then, of course, work at will. The gig economy was certainly well underway pre-pandemic. And I think it obviously will continue to grow in the next normal, but really the contingent roles or contract roles are really so much more acceptable, sought after. One recent study that I read of C-suite executives said that almost 40% of their workforce now is contingent, where it used to average about 20 to 25%. So certainly that work at will has accelerated because of the pandemic, and I think it will continue to accelerate as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Deb. I think as a staffing supplier, we've seen that as well. Some of our candidate pools who were resistant to, say, contingent work are now realizing that it's actually it could be a pretty good deal and a pretty good opportunity once they've gotten out of the mindset that, oh, I need to be, a full-time employee of my host organization. That sort of thirst has definitely lessened with so many of the opportunities that work from anywhere is provided. So thank you. And then last but certainly not least, Serene, why don't you take a moment, introduce yourself and overview what you're seeing?
Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that. Hello, you guys. My name is Serene Vividelli. I am with Common Spirit Health, which is the largest not-for-profit healthcare organization in the United States. For those of you that may not be familiar, we are a combination of Dignity Health facilities as well as Catholic Healthcare Initiative facilities. So the trend we're seeing is COVID has clearly had a very large impact on our organization. What we've done and what our mission is treating the disenfranchised for maybe displaced patients. So what we've actually done as a company is we've treated the patients at no cost. We take the cost. So anyone coming in with COVID, we're covering that cost. So it's kind of the back end. It's really put us into a different way we have to look at sourcing and procuring different items. So I sit and I'm director over the vendor management office. So I have oversight for both our contingent labor program, our SOW program, as well as procuring all of the IT goods. So the type of labor that my organization sources is we typically source the higher end healthcare IT. It doesn't necessarily have to be healthcare, but it's the higher end IT roles. We are seeing attrition like we've never seen before. So for us historically, we had a lot of people when they were FTEs, they stayed around a long time. They were happy here, good organization. We didn't have to compete with the remote landscape. Being in a remote landscape now, we are now competing and losing people that would never even look at a job opportunity because it would require them to move. And now those job opportunities with all of us being remote, it's caused a difference. So we've also been an organization, Deb, you mentioned it, we are an organization that is very much 70% FTE, 30% contract labor. We are seeing a shift in momentum because what we're doing is we have a lot of projects that we have to go live with. You guys know with staffing projects, you don't necessarily want to look for long-term labor, right? Because that may only be 6 months, 4 months. And so we're having to look at ways of how can we get labor in here faster? It is not fast enough. And how do we get quality labor in here? So that's the trend that we're seeing is we're looking to move more to both utilizing our MSP, VMS program, but also where can we maybe a master supplier. I want to say we call it direct sourcing. It's not in the sense of what normal direct sourcing is. Can we contract with a large supplier that can come in, get us this labor faster? Also, it's more of a follow the sun model. We need labor around the clock. So we're looking at utilizing a lot more offshoring than we did in the past. That's how COVID's impacted our organization.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Serene. And that was great. And for our audience, I think Serene's audio may have been a little jumbled at certain points during it. I think most of it did come through. So if you do have any questions, while this is pre-recorded, we will be attending during the live rollout. Drop a few questions. I'm sure Serene would be able to clarify anything that came up that was perhaps during some of our audio disconnection there. But yeah, thank you to the panel here. I think this is a great way to get us started. Overview, what we're seeing and some of the outcomes we're trying to drive moving forward. That's going to bring us to our next area. That really sets the stage for what we're trying to do here in the supply and demand of talent. In talking with Al and Deb and Serene ahead of time, we understand that COVID-19 has shifted the momentum in supply and demand, shifted the supply and demand areas of talent at this point. It's very different than it was, say, January of 2020. So how does the change in acceptable work environments, work anywhere, core business hours, et cetera, impact that supply and demand? But then also, what are we doing to overcome that? Let's take it a step further. How are we leveraging the supply and demand shortages to our benefit within our organization? So I believe, we're going to start with Alan and Serene, from the buying side of things. Give your perspective, focus on the differences in the type of talent you both procure. I think you both briefly touched on it above. But then how are you overcoming those talent deficits? And what are some of the areas areas of focus you have right now?
Yep. So Jimmy, I mean, we do have part of our contingent workforce that is in that group that can do the work from anywhere. But then our plants that have still been operating throughout the pandemic because they're creating chemicals that are needed and considered essential. Those people still have to be on site. So, when I mentioned before that we've taken some customized approaches, we're using those approaches to ensure we're getting candidates into the process quickly, making sure we're not setting our bar, higher than needed. Right. So are we looking for more experience than is needed, and ensuring that we're competing financially? So, I mean, some examples of that for a few of our sites, we've reviewed the job requirements and the assessments that we're using to make sure we're being more flexible in the screening processes for roles that may be primarily labor or material handlers. Right. For a few other sites where our suppliers have been struggling to submit candidates and where we think the BSF brand would be a stronger draw. We've posted requisitions in our applicant tracking system and had our, our normal full-time hiring team work through the requisitions to build a pool of temporary candidates. And clearly stating in those positions that the successful candidate will be hired by one of our staffing agencies, but really, using our own brand to pull some people together. So a form of direct sourcing that way. And then one site in a highly competitive market, so lots of manufacturing growth and expansion in that market. They've provided what we're calling a retention bonus, which is available after completing 30 days on assignment, which has both helped attract workers into the opportunity and also to keep them, quote unquote, patient as they wait to clear our background and medical screenings that, take a little bit longer than some of the other employers in the market. And we've shared that success with some of our other struggling sites, and I expect a few more of them are going to take that approach too. And really the rationale is if you're paying a bonus after 30 days, you're going to save that money in the overtime you're running or the risk of fatigue with a manufacturing workforce or lost productivity if a machine's not running because you don't have enough staff. So the bonus is well worth it. So we've looked at a lot of things like that to address the supply demand and help our suppliers bring people into the process.
And Alan, that's a very interesting point, the retention bonus. Are you doing that for your full-time direct hire staff, your contingent workforce, or both?
Oh, it's for the contingent workforce. So, I mean, it is something where we partnered based on feedback from our supplier, and it's a site that has a master vendor relationship. So they have a very intimate knowledge, and they've been supporting us for a long time. And they just hit a brick wall, right? They couldn't get people to come into their process, or they were taking other opportunities before they could clear our background screening.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, and it allows you to invest a little bit more upfront in those resources versus having that negative attrition down the line. Sounds like a great solution to some of these supply shortages in your area. Serene, why don't you chime in as well here? I know you have a very different type of workforce and are experiencing your own supply and demand challenges. How are you overcoming that talent deficit, as we've been calling it?
Yeah, definitely. And Alan, I think that's a fantastic idea on the retention bonus. I have to admit, I just took note myself. So that's a great idea. Like I alluded to, we have way more demand than there is supply. So we're just trying to get as absolutely creative as we can. We're trying multiple options. We're kind of looking at a hybrid mix, where we're utilizing our MSP, and in that program, we're doing, right to work, go to work, where we're skipping the interview process. If it's one of those PM, certain style developers where you can really get a solid review on that resume and you can put together a very structured, these are the soft skills we need. That's an option we're doing where we're, you mentioned it, Alan, on the kind of the background drug test. We'll let them start, but if anything comes up, then, after 30 days, you'll be removed. That's working for us. We're going the master supplier route where we are negotiating new rate cards. We are also focusing on geographic now that we're remote and people are working all across the country. For us, it really has started making an impact, right? Because I'm not going to pay someone in New York City the same thing I'm going to pay someone in Omaha, Nebraska. So we've had to look at how can we attract the right talent? We always used one rate card in the past. So that's another thing that we're trying to do to bring this talent in. And I think really for us is also trying to focus on the positives of when you're coming in. You know, we're really trying to digitize healthcare. There's a lot of exciting activities taking place in healthcare and how we can modernize that and how we can move to more of that remote centric. So it's focusing on that because a lot of people in some of these higher end IT roles, let's say cyber, let's say some of the digital, a lot of those individuals, they really like to move around every 18 months to 2 years because they like to work on the new next exciting project. So it's also changing my hiring manager's mindset because a lot of our leadership, they're still kind of coming around. Like they don't understand, well, why has this person been at 5 different companies in X amount of time? Like that's not always a negative. You got to look at it a little bit differently. Yeah. So really for us, the quicker we can bring these resources in, we're going to explore all avenues, but yet again, while trying to maintain those costs and bringing them down. So that's really how we're approaching it right now.
Excellent. And, you know, I want to get Deb in here in a second, but one quick follow-up, maybe 30 seconds for each of you. How can, for the suppliers in the audience here, how can the suppliers be helpful to you during this time of talent deficit where you're struggling to get the right resources? What are your best suppliers doing? How have they been helpful to you in this challenging time of supply and demand? Alan, if you want to take it from there, you know, any food for thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy, I think that's a good question. I think for one, it's them being open and transparent with giving us the feedback, right? So, you know, I mentioned the retention bonus that was kicked in based on that supplier being willing to say, we can't get people to come into your process or make it through. And we've worked proactively together to look for those ways to address it. And I think the other thing is you know, and I think we're all experiencing a lot of no-shows, whether it's for interviews, whether it's for people who've actually accepted an offer. A lot of times, you know, and I know those people ghost, right? But I think if the suppliers can actually truly go get the reasons, that also helps us all work together to try to address those things, right? And we can only give the supplier more information if they tell us what the problems are in the available workforce.
No, that's a great point. And I can tell you at NTech, one of the things we really focus on, we use an automated platform, but we do, depending on the time of the interview, same day or morning of check-ins of confirmation of availability. And that's not foolproof. You know, at the end of the day, if a candidate's not going to show, they're not going to show, even if they confirm or they don't. But we always pass that along. If we have an instance where a candidate hasn't confirmed the interview, we'll just send a quick message. Hey, they still might show, but I just want you to be prepared for that. So to help, you know, blunt the impact of that sort of thing. So that's great. And then Serene, again, 30 seconds from you perhaps, and then we'll get Deb in the conversation from her perspective. What could the suppliers be doing to be helpful in this time of supply and demand challenge?
I actually just have to completely agree with Alan. I mean, give us the feedback. What are we doing wrong? Why are we not getting candidates? Why are the candidates jumping? Something we're running into is sometimes our hiring managers don't have the availability, or they'll switch the interviewer at the last minute. And I don't think that that's always the best approach, you know, and I completely depend on the suppliers to give me the feedback of where we're missing the mark so then we can improve and what can we do better. But I also look at them to come to me with creative ideas. How do we staff? Is this the best way of staffing contingent job posting? We keep looking for our suppliers. You need to help us innovate. You need to look at our relationship different and look how you can help us drive these projects forward versus kind of that typical supplier relationship. So that's another thing, because we do a lot of SOW labor as well, Jimmy. So that's another thing we're looking for is you help us move the dial. What can you do to invest in us to grow our product and to grow what we want to build?
Excellent. Yeah, and I think that definitely speaks towards our philosophy of going beyond a transactional relationship and being true partners. And I think that's important. And you know, that's a good segue to Deb. You know, as an MSP partner, I think we heard Alan and Serene talk a lot about what's going on and the challenges they're facing. And I know you as an MSP are their trusted advisor in a lot of ways. What are you advising your clients? What are you doing with your teams? How are you managing the suppliers. I'll give you the whole floor here to talk through it for a couple minutes about what your role in MSP and how you can impact this supply and demand challenge.
Sure, and thank you, Jimmy. And I totally agree with Alan and Serene, right? It comes down to communication and transparency in what's really going on, right? Because that is the foundation of a true partnership. So we're seeing a lot of the same things Alan mentioned about retention bonuses or incentive bonuses. Some of our customers even working with them to maybe offer some sick time that's not always within a contingent assignment, especially in this environment where people may need to take time off if they've been exposed or ill, or a family member is, or a child has. So we're seeing those things. We're working with customers too on potentially looking at the background screenings. Are there some nuances maybe that someone can start a role, maybe an international education background check, right? Something like that can take weeks, if not months. Is that something we want to sort of preclude this person from coming on site, or maybe do something a little bit more in parallel? We're also talking with customers about tenure limitations. Many programs have different tenure limitations, a year, 2 years, 18 months, whatever it may be. And talking about as people are maybe hitting that tenure, looking at the assignment and maybe extending that maybe by 3 or 4 months, might get that project finished without trying to go out and recruit just because of a hard and fast tenure rule. So it's another thing we're working with customers on. And then from a talent perspective, we see not only a supply and demand inequality, but sometimes we see a skills gap, particularly in life sciences. So we're offering upskilling and reskilling, and certainly some certification programs so that individuals may be able to recertify or certify in a slightly different field, where then they become viable talent for some of the positions that are out there for our customers.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big wave of the future. Doing these sort of in-house apprenticeship programs. I've spoken about this previously in other forums. It's something we've been trying to do, and doing those upskillings to bridge that skills gap and the divide. And, just to offer some feedback as well, I think we've seen in the background check, we've seen clients become a little bit more lenient around drug screening, depending on the type of role they're in, the sensitive information they're capturing, and also dropping some of the employment verification requirements from the background. That's also been helpful as well. So those are some areas that we've been seeing that's helped. It accelerates the process. We have less fall off between offer acceptance and start when we can reduce some of the paperwork and whatnot that's needed when these candidates do have choice. So wonderful. Well, thank you. This was a great section. And it really does lead the way. I think some of what we touched on will impact our discussion here next around direct sourcing and total talent management. If you've been in any of these forums over the last couple of years, it's been a predominant feature. And so we'd be remiss not to touch on it. And I mentioned earlier about momentum. I think COVID-19 has been a momentum starter and a momentum stopper for a number of initiatives across the industry. And so I'm curious for our panel here about what you're doing in direct sourcing and total talent management. Has COVID-19 impacted your momentum towards achieving those goals? And has it changed your courses at all, and how that has been working for you? So Deb, I'll start here with you on your end. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you're seeing, how momentum's changed, and any advice you might be able to give our audience?
Sure, thanks. From a direct sourcing perspective, historically, two programs, the MSP program and the direct sourcing program, used to really travel on somewhat divergent paths. But what we're seeing now is really the need to bring those two paths together and create more of a hybrid model, offering both MSP through a panel supply base and direct sourcing through talent communities. And what we've seen in some research is that over 50% of our MSPs have some type of hybrid that includes both of those, which is really up from 12% in years prior. And it really is allowing access to talent in various forms. From a total talent management perspective, really that is front and center with the customers that we're speaking to. We all know that contract labor and contingent labor were parts of organizations, but as someone mentioned early, the acceptance of those types of roles really has changed because of the pandemic. And companies are looking at their workforces in totality now, recognizing that it takes full-time employees, people on a statement of work, people in a contingent or contract role to really get the job done. So they're looking at the workforce and offering opportunities to the workforce in totality more than ever from a total talent management perspective.
Excellent. And for you, Deb, are you utilizing the same suppliers to handle both your, like the contingent labor direct hiring? As an MSP, are you looking to vet suppliers for both sides? How are you approaching supplier selection for that sort of total talent program?
Yeah, so actually it varies by customer. We work very closely with our customers as to what the needs are and how we're going to balance the program, because you want to make sure that both avenues are successful and feel like they're given the opportunities to fulfill roles. So sometimes it's, the same supplier. Sometimes we reach into our MSP supply base to see where the capabilities are to bring in direct sourcing and talent communities. We obviously have our own direct sourcing and talent community model. So it's really a variety of options that we work with our customers on in conversation about what's going to build the best hybrid program to bring the talent in that they need.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Deb. And then Alan, why don't we head up your way here? You touched on this in a couple of our sections earlier on. How are you guys approaching total talent management? How are you doing these sort of soft landings, so to speak, for direct sourcing? And how has it been born out of COVID-19, either one way or the other?
Yeah, so I'd say, we've experimented with some direct sourcing. So actually, going out and doing that, right? And whether it's building it through referrals or actually building it through directly going out and sourcing for talent for some specific needs. But it's funny because I also think when you come to direct sourcing, I mean, a lot of companies define that different ways. Our current temporary workforce is probably about a third on payroll. So they've been sourced already through referrals or through, some other kind of efforts of our managers or, networking. But we're trying to build upon that because we realize they're doing that work now. We've actually looked to build a model. So we have built the BSF private talent community model to hopefully bring that work into our MSP program versus having managers do it decentralized on their own, because that is a lot of work for managers to do, to actually reach out to somebody, make that initial contact, screen them, keep them warm until an opening comes up. I'd rather have those referrals come to our direct sourcing team. And then looking at total talent management, as you kind of look to blend that in, we're trying to build some muscles within our managers' skill sets to get them to hire for the work and not the job, and to really bring on the best combination of employees and contingent workers. And we've launched a freelancer network option within our MSP within the last couple of months as well. So we have 2 different freelancer portals available to our managers. We're still working on the communications and change management to build in some of these things, but to give everybody some ideas on what we're trying to get them to think of as they kind of deconstruct a job and hire for the work, is what are those specific skills needed, the short-term versus long-term need for those skills, where those skills are most likely most available or scarcity, and then the required timeline of productivity for somebody to actually do the work. So we're hoping as they start looking at that, they start taking a head count, and maybe we don't go hire that same person who just left, but maybe we split that up and it becomes a contingent worker and a freelancer, because we identify some of this work is actually 40 hours a week for an indefinite amount of time, and some of it we just need 10 hours a week for the next 3 months. So we're looking to build that into our, it's in our toolkit. We now need to build the manager's muscles on actually using it.
Excellent. No, those are some great ideas. And I think what I'm taking away from a lot of this is, for a long time, I think we heard, direct sourcing and total talent management as distinct programs. But I think what we're hearing from our panel is that, we need to take more of a hybrid approach. We need to take more of a malleable thought process toward things. It doesn't have to be all in or all out on one of these aspects. You can wade through on a lot of them. And Alan, one follow-up question I had for you as for folks who are exploring perhaps the journey that you are now embarking on, when it comes to funneling these through your program and identifying these brand leverage talent, so to speak, are you looking to have your MSP manage those influx of those? Are you looking at internal full-time staff, or are you looking at a third party altogether? How are you going to scale those activities that need to be done when it comes to curating that pipeline for you?
Yep. So that BSF private talent community for the contingent workers, we have built that through our MSP provider. So, as Deb said, you could go outside and have a company manage it, or you could do it within your program. We've done it within our program. So currently there's one dedicated person working on that and using a CRM tool to engage and communicate And we expect that will expand, and hopefully they will eventually need another resource. But right now, that only went live in Q3 of last year as well. So during a still kind of downtime, and especially since we expect a lot of those referrals and also possibilities to redeploy people who finish payroll assignments, a lot of that probably sits within our office locations, which aren't doing as much hiring right now as our plants are.
Excellent.
So hopefully next year or later this year, I should say, we'll have more to talk about with the success of the program, but it's very new right now.
Excellent. And, I really can appreciate that and all of you for your time today. I think this has been an engaging discussion. And for our audience, please, ask questions in the Q&A. Look us up in the Passable platform as we get going through this conference. I think we all are excited to engage and share a bit more than we had today. And I'll certainly just end on this, as a staffing supplier myself and interacting with these great folks here today, I just advise, don't be afraid to engage, step outside of that transactional relationship. All of these folks here want to hear from you and vice versa. So don't be afraid to share some feedback, create good partnerships. And I think it'll make some of the challenges we're collectively facing in COVID-19 a little bit easier together. So thanks everybody for their time. We really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jimmy, Alan, Serene, and Deb for the great discussion. Really great to have you on this panel. And thank you so much for your participation. As Jimmy noted, you're all on the chat right now. Please make a note to them if you have any questions. Also, if you want to set up any private meetings in Pathable, you can do that as well. Great way to kick things off and look forward to our next sessions.